When I reviewed manuscripts at a top literary agency, I saw this very specific type of opening in the slush pile constantly. And it almost never works. And when two of my brave subscribers submitted their opening pages to me for critique, I immediately noticed they both fall into this exact trap. But don't worry. As with all writing rules, there are always exceptions, which I will show you at the end of this video. And by the time we get there, you'll understand exactly why this opening strategy usually fails and what separates the rare version that works. So put on your editing cap with me and let's see if you can spot the problem in manuscript 1, which is adult sci-fi fantasy. The fluorescent tubes buzzed overhead with harsh brightness, washing the hospital hallway walls in sterile white and lifeless gray. Adrian's boots hammered the scuffled vinyl flooring. Each impact rattled his jaws. His chest heaved with desperate breath. Up ahead, the morgue door crept into view, dark, cold, gunmetal gray, its surface matte and unwelcoming. White walls blurred past him. His cheeks burned, streaked with tears and sweat. "Mom, hold on! Wait for me! I'm almost there!" He charged at the heavy steel door, shoulder first crashing into it. The impact jarred his collarbone. The door swung open. A young nurse stumbled back from the doorway, nearly dropping her clipboard. Her eyes widened. "You can't go in!" She threw her palms against his chest, trying to push him back. "The body's not ready yet." "Mom," he gasped, eyes burning. "I want to see my mom." His voice tore through the hallway. Desperate, he lunged forward. Before he could force himself inside, the half-opened cold metal door and the image of the young nurse began dissolving and twisting inward, and in an instant, he was standing in the middle of a vast empty room. Everything around him blurred together as the floors melted into walls and walls faded into a void. No distant footsteps, no voices, not even his own heartbeat. A single bed stood in front of him. A body lay on it, wrapped head to toe in a bleached white sheet, so still as if carved from marble. He took a step closer towards the body. His pulse began to thunder in his ears. Lights flickered, then winked out. The bed, the sheet, the body, all gone, vanished into the darkness with a blink of an eye. "Mom," his voice cracked, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mom, please come back. Mom, please. Mom, where did you go? Please, please." Nothing answered him. Adrian jolted upright in his own bed, sweat-soaked sheets twisted around his torso. His chest heaved, hands shaking. He ran his fingers through his hair, slightly pressing down against his skull to steady himself. The pressure helped. It was just a dream, the same one, replaying over and over since his mother's unexpected death and her body's unexplained disappearance from the hospital morgue 5 years ago. Clearly, this writer knows how to ground us in strong sensory detail. The fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the gray gunmetal morgue door, and the body looking like a marble statue. I felt totally transported into the hospital scene, and the emotional stakes couldn't be higher. We see a son desperately calling after his dead mother. But this opening isn't working as written, and I'll come back to exactly why. First, I want us to read manuscript number 2, which is also adult sci-fi fantasy. It was a gray morning. Ominous clouds were hanging in the sky, layered as massive cotton balls, ready to pour down. The stillness in the air was palpable. There was a vast green field with the most magnificent spread of wild yellow flowers. They were strewn all over the field as if someone wanted a canvas of green and yellow. The field sloped upwards toward the west, and one could see a long line of silver at the horizon, stretching across the width of the field. This line was oddly alive. The specks of brown and black sticks under it seemed to twitch. Gradually, this line advanced, and another silver line followed it down the slope. This was a marching cavalry. Small flags were jutting out of this wave of silver. The entire formation came to a stop when the entire slope was covered by it. Until this moment, Jacob stood still and watched what was unfolding in front of him. He was tall, skinny, of pale white complexion and bushy brown hair. It looked like somebody had dropped him in the middle of this field. He looked anxious and breathing heavily. He slowly turned back only to come face to face with a massive bearded man. He had a giant scar across his face and was dressed in very cheap, dirty-looking brown dress. A cracked belt held him together. He was wielding a large shield in one hand and a mean-looking axe in the other. He paid no attention that Jacob was staring straight into him. And he wasn't alone. There was a long line of equally haggard-looking men on his either side. Everyone had this stern look on them. They were fixated at the cavalry in front of them. Jacob was standing right in front of all these foot soldiers. He swallowed his spit and gave a bewildered look on either side and began to wonder how on earth he reached there. If anything happens, he would be caught in the middle of it. And as if somebody read his mind, a faint sound of bugle came from the opposite side of the field. Jacob turned back and saw all the horses began to twitch even more furiously and eventually began to walk forward. The entire formation started to move. Jacob sensed a lot of movement behind him. All the soldiers started to make grunting noises and began to flex their arms and weapons. Somebody let out a yell and everyone followed suit. Jacob had to cover his ears to drown out the roar. Even though the horses were covering ground quickly, the men behind him stood firm. Jacob frantically moved to his side, trying to locate a break in the line for escape, and yet no one seemed to be bothered by his presence. He was confused by what was happening, but panic had taken over him. Once he ran to his right and then to his left, but he couldn't see any gap in the formation. He would surely be sandwiched between the silver and the brown. He glanced over his shoulder, and to his horror, the horses mustn't be more than 100 feet away and were galloping at full speed. All men in front of him were in a frenzy, yelling and stomping their feet firmly in the ground, as if to break the oncoming wave. A nauseating feeling came over Jacob. This would be the place where he was going to die. He could hear the horses' hooves hitting the ground. As he turned around, he noticed that all the knights had drawn their swords. It was a blinding display of silver. The entire cavalry was just a few yards away. The oncoming knight positioned his sword to strike, while the soldier behind Jacob raised his shield. Jacob crouched in fear, and just when the armies were about to collide, he closed his eyes. He heard a crunching sound of metal meeting wood. Horses neighed. Men were yelling. There was a swishing sound, and a loud thud followed, like something heavy fell next to him. Suddenly, he heard another sound. It was sharp and rhythmic. He felt funny in his stomach and all of a sudden was lifted off the field and sucked into the sky. Before he could understand what just happened, his eyes opened and he woke with a jump. He was breathing heavily and could feel heavy drops of sweat on his forehead and armpits. His alarm was blazing away and told him it was 5 a.m. Not again, groaned Jacob. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, wondering if his dreams were getting weirder. He stopped the alarm and lowered his feet to the ground. He felt exhausted, same as after the others in the past. There are great sensory details in this manuscript too, like the cotton ball clouds, the galloping horses, and the intimidating line of soldiers. We're whisked right into the center of a battle, so there's momentum and urgency right away. But after reading these two manuscripts, you probably know what the mistake is. It's revealing that the whole opening scene was actually a dream or a nightmare. It's one of the most common pieces of writing advice and one I've given on this channel before. Don't open with a dream sequence. And yet I still see it all the time. This mistake is right up there with opening with a character waking up, which, by the way, both of these manuscripts also do because it's the natural progression after a dream scene. I'm not saying that a dream opening can never be effective. In just a minute, I'm going to show you an example of a dream opening that works really well from one of the most famous novels of all time, no less. But first, I want you to understand why the vast majority of dream openings fall flat. So let's break down what's really happening in manuscript 1, because I was just discussing this exact same issue with a client the other day. This dream, or rather nightmare, is being used to convey to the reader the protagonist's inner turmoil, but it comes across as a bit melodramatic. Adrian's chest is heaving, his voice is cracking, he's sobbing uncontrollably. And then there's the series of exclamations. Mom, hold on, wait for me, I'm almost there. Then, Mom, I want to see my mom. Then, Mom, please come back. Mom, please. Mom, where did you go? Please, please. Often more subtle, quiet displays of emotion are more effective than loud, obvious ones like this. After all, we don't feel emotionally invested in Adrian yet, and we know nothing about his relationship with his mother. So his anguish doesn't really hit us in the way the author intends. And then here's the big issue. As soon as he wakes up, all of the tension that was established in that opening hospital dream scene immediately deflates. Because we know none of that actually happened. It was all in Adrian's mind. It then becomes clear that the author was just using the dream sequence as a means of delivering backstory. Look at that last line. It was just a dream, the same one, replaying over and over since his mother's unexplained death and her body's unexplained disappearance from the hospital morgue 5 years ago. The dream is meant to show us how he feels about losing his mother before we unpack it in the main narrative. This is why it's so critical to ask yourself what your dream scene is really doing in the story, the purpose that it's serving. And I just recently had this exact conversation with a client of mine. I gave her feedback that we needed a few key pieces of backstory to be moved earlier in the story, because without them, we didn't understand the protagonist's inner conflict enough to get emotionally invested in it. We didn't know what she was grappling with internally, so we didn't care about her journey. Then my client said, "Oh, in an earlier draft, I actually began the novel with a dream that showed all of that backstory, so I'll just put that back in." But I stopped her right there. Because if you're using a dream or nightmare scene to do the heavy lifting of delivering backstory to your reader, then you're probably leaning on it as a crutch. The better and smoother solution is to weave in the necessary exposition into the action of the main narrative. A brief memory or reflection triggered by something real happening in the present moment. For this manuscript, that might look like opening with Adrian on the 5-year anniversary of his mother's death, doing something. Perhaps visiting the hospital or visiting the graveyard where she's buried, or dodging a phone check-in from a relative. Then, as we see him navigate that conflict that's weighing on him in real time, we'll get the necessary backstory and we will understand the emotional anguish that he's feeling. Give us a real scene with real stakes and let the background details come to the surface through what he does and thinks about. We'll feel so much more connected to him and his conflict that way, and you'll avoid the disruptive, jarring moment where he's thrown out of a dream and we have to recalibrate. Now, manuscript number 2 falls short for a completely different reason, and this one is trickier. In the first manuscript, the conflict that we see the protagonist navigating in the dream is the same one they're facing in their real life. The dream is just delivering us backstory. But in this second manuscript, the conflict we see in the dream actually has nothing to do with the protagonist's real-world life, at least as far as we can tell. We see Jacob in the midst of a chaotic battlefield, but then as soon as he wakes up, there are no soldiers, no cavalry, no danger. So the writers spent their manuscript's most valuable real estate, the opening pages, on a conflict that doesn't actually exist. We essentially just got faked out. Now, I'm not suggesting that this dream is completely random. I'm certain that the author put it here for a reason. I suspect that this battle foreshadows a conflict that Jacob will face later in the story, especially because it's sci-fi fantasy. But my suggestion would be to open with Jacob in the real world, dealing with his real world conflict and concerns, and then let the fantastical setting be revealed to us in time, rather than immediately immersing us in it only to take us right back out of it. Because remember that your reader gets invested in whatever you show them first. And in this manuscript, the dream scene goes on for quite some time. We really think we're in there with Jacob. You're indicating that this is the character's situation. These are the stakes, and this is why you should care. So then when everything on the first 2 pages turns out not to be real, you've broken the reader's trust in a way. You're forcing us to totally start over and recalibrate everything we thought we knew about the story and about the character. That can be a really jarring transition to have in your first pages, which is why dream scenes almost never work. But like I said at the beginning, all writing rules are really just guidelines. So for the flip side, I want to show you an example of an opening dream scene that works brilliantly. But before I share it, if you want to submit your pages to be critiqued in a future video, sign up for my newsletter Chapter Break and join the premium tier. You'll get weekly writing insights from me that I don't post anywhere on this channel, along with exclusive interviews with literary agents and best-selling authors that are full of insight to help you on your writing journey. The link is in the description below. Okay, here's the opening of a famous novel that features a dream sequence. Last night, I dreamt I went to Manderley again. It seemed to me I stood by the iron gate leading to the drive, and for a while I could not enter, for the way was barred to me. There was a padlock and a chain upon the gate. I called in my dream to the lodge keeper and had no answer, and peering closer through the rusted spokes of the gate, I saw that the lodge was uninhabited. No smoke came from the chimney, and the little lattice windows gaped forlorn. Then, like all dreamers, I was possessed of a sudden with supernatural powers and passed like a spirit through the barrier before me. The drive wound away in front of me, twisting and turning as it had always done, but as I advanced, I was aware that a change had come upon it. It was narrow and unkempt, not the drive that we had known. At first I was puzzled and did not understand, and it was only when I bent my head to avoid the low swinging branch of a tree that I realized what had happened. Nature had come into her own again, and little by little, in her stealthy, insidious way, had encroached upon the drive with long, tenacious fingers. The woods, always a menace, even in the past, had triumphed in the end. They crowded, dark and uncontrolled, to the borders of the drive. The beeches with white, naked limbs leant close to one another, their branches intermingled in a strange embrace, making a vault above my head like the archway of a church. And there were other trees as well, trees that I did not recognize, squat oaks and tortured elms that straggled cheek by jowl with the beeches, and had thrust themselves out of the quiet earth, along with monster shrubs and plants, none of which I remembered. Did you recognize this passage? It's Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, one of the most iconic novel openings of all time. So why does this dream scene work so well when the other two didn't? The answer lies in the very first line of the novel. Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again. The narrator tells us outright it's a dream. There's no bait and switch, no jarring transition, no fake out. We know we're in a dream from the start, so the author never asks us to invest in fake stakes, and we never feel deflated when the narrator wakes up. In fact, this narrator is completely self-aware that she's in the dream, and she's actually guiding us through what she sees and observes in it. Now let's look at what this dream is actually doing, its purpose in the story, and how that differs from the other two manuscripts. This dream is essentially functioning as a guided tour of Manderley, foreshadowing the destruction that's to come. And if you've read Rebecca, you know why that's so important. The estate of Manderley is essentially a character in its own right. The entire story revolves around the house and what happened inside. So the author uses the dream to show us Manderley as it exists now, ruined and overgrown, which begs the question, what happened to this magnificent place? It makes us want to keep reading to figure out how and why it crumbled. It sets up the story beautifully without heavy-handedly delivering backstory or asking us to invest in a false conflict. So if you're determined to open your novel with a dream, ask yourself, why is it necessary? What can the dream convey that your character's reality can't? And what would the reader actually lose if you cut the dream? You need to have really, really good answers to justify it. And if you can't come up with them, then try starting your story with the actual conflict your protagonist is facing in the real world. I bet that'll be just as, if not more, captivating. As an editor, I know firsthand how hard it can be to figure out if the opening, not to mention the rest of your story, is working as you intend. So if you want professional eyes on your manuscript, submit an inquiry through my website. I've built a team of the best-in-class developmental editors from the world's top publishing houses and literary agencies, and we would love to help you take your story to the next level. I hope this video made you think more critically about where you open your novel and illuminated some strategies to better hook your reader. If you're enjoying this series where I critique real manuscripts submitted by you, then watch this video next, where I reveal the most common mistake that kills your story on page 1. Thanks so much for watching, and happy writing!